A conscription, which was intensive during the Korean crisis, was retained at levels by design, permitted many of the unwilling to escape service. Some, perhaps many Ivy League students, preferred ROTC to conscripted service in the ranks. And that's why they were in ROTC. But a positive, or at least an acquiescent attitude to service in the armed forces was pervasive. A term of military service was normal for many Americans, for many American men, thank you, coming of age after the intensive mobilization of the Second World War. And as Kathy has pointed out, a divide gradually emerged between those whose citizenship included a term of military service and younger cohorts who defined the obligations of citizenship entirely in terms of civilian activities. That divide, of course, sharpened after the end of conscription in '73. In 1956, Princeton graduated 400 students who later served in uniform. For the class of 2004, that number was 9. The citizen soldier remains an ideal, but its celebration is broadly vicarious. At any one point in time, about 1% of the population is in military service. The nation's military endeavors after September 2001 do not require extensive mobilization in terms of taxation, manpower, or intensive popular enthusiasm. On the contrary, a relaxed mobilization is key to our long-term military endeavors. The current model of military mobilization is compatible with the routine functioning of civil society. Ivy League students, to some measure, reflect this broad picture. They are culturally and personally distant from the military, more by incomprehension and distaste, I think, than hostility. Their sense of citizenship obligations turns solely or largely on voluntary activity in civil society, and again, as Kathy has pointed out, prevailingly, they lack personal connections with people in military service. Now, in public discourse, it often appears that elitist Ivy League colleges, universities, are wholly responsible for ROTC's absence from its self-indulgent campuses. However, the military has made its own contribution to the present unsatisfactory state of affairs. The bad university, a good military narrative, vividly remembers the convulsion of the 1960s, but takes little or no notice of the military's long-term response. For example, I'm quoting from the Army Cadet Command's official history, the abolition of ROTC units at elite institutions along the eastern seaboard was more than offset, quantitatively at least, by the creation of additional detachments in the south and west. Some feared that the average quality of ROTC students would drop and that the social balance of the Army Officer Corps would be upset. Other officials and officers were glad to see the Army sever relations with schools, which in their opinion had never been avid supporters of the military. And this division, I've ended my quotation from this text, persists more or less, I gather, in all the services. The divorce between the Ivy League and ROTC programs is linked as part of a conspicuous withdrawal of ROTC from the Northeast region as a whole and its diverse urban areas. We all remember that this began in the period of the Vietnam War, but it is less known that it continued during the drawdown of the 1990s. Budgetary constraints encourage the shift because more young officers can be procured for less expenditure at large public institutions, many of which, of course, are legally obligated to accept ROTC programs. The military also prefers to locate programs in regions with pervasive pro-military cultures. To take but one illustration, many more are available. Virginia, with a population of about 7,500,000, has 12 Army ROTC programs, while New York City, with a population of 8,500,000, has 2. The military's budgetary problems are a counterpart of academia's concern with don't ask, don't tell, and faculty autonomy. All of these are genuine concerns in themselves. They may also offer a plausible cover for an underlying attitude. In the military's case, a preference for regions with pro-military cultures, so-called pro-military cultures, and aversion to campuses where anti-military sentiment took highly charged forms 4 decades ago, and to a certain extent, as we've heard, continue today in attenuated, if palpable, forms. The Department of Defense should go out of its way to create ROTC programs in places where the nation's future military endeavors may well provoke active criticism and opposition. It is the historical norm that the nation's wars are politically contested. World War II and much of the Cold War were exceptionally consensual, and Vietnam was exceptionally rancorous. To apply the consensual model of World War II and the Cold War to the future is to constrict a democratic debate on military policies. The Ivy League may serve as a conspicuous model, combining the military service of some students with a vigorous political culture of debate on military policy as determined by civilian government. It is a corrosive civic scandal that those with high prospects in the society and economy are egregiously underrepresented in military service. This inflicts symbolic and substantive damage on the Republic. It weakens ties that ought to bind all citizens and deprives our military of broadly educated officers needed now more than ever. Civilian and military leadership should bind up the nation's cultural wounds and reach out to the splendid young men and women in the Ivy League and other selective private institutions who will wish to serve the nation under arms.